How's it going, you awesome bunch of bakers? I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'll show you how to make a super tasty fig and hazelnut tart. So let's get in the kitchen and see how it goes. I had such a sweet tooth this week that I made two tart videos, Bakewell tart and this fig and hazelnut tart. The principles of both recipes are quite similar, in that they both have very similar pastry bases and very similar cake mixes inside. The main difference is that the Bakewell tart is made with ground almonds, and this tart of course is made with ground hazelnuts. Filling this tart with halved figs creates not only a beautiful look, but also a great flavor and texture experience. To top it all off, it's glazed with honey before serving. I cannot tell you which of the tarts is better. I love them both. Okay, let's get to it. Let's see what we need to make this thing. For the pastry base, we'll need some butter, icing sugar, an egg yolk, white bread flour and some salt. For the filling, we'll need some more butter, some more icing sugar, some vanilla paste or vanilla essence. We'll also need egg. We'll need 5 to 6 small figs. We'll need some hazelnuts for both the pastry and for the filling. And we'll need some honey for glazing. The reason why I'm using whole hazelnuts is because I couldn't find any ground hazelnuts. If you can find ground hazelnuts, go ahead, buy them. It'll be easier. I'm going to show you how I turn my whole hazelnuts into ground hazelnuts. For that, I use my NutriBullet. You can use a regular food processor. A NutriBullet is actually a little bit too powerful for this. You want to pulse the nuts instead of blending them continuously. If the nuts warm up too much, they'll turn into hazelnut butter. One way to prevent overheating is by chilling the nuts before blitzing them. I kept them in the freezer for half an hour before I blitzed them up. They didn't turn into a perfect powder, so I had to sift them through a sieve. But in the end the result was pretty good. When it comes to the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a whisk, a spatula, a rolling pin. A piping bag will really come in handy, but you could definitely survive without it. We'll need a piece of baking paper, which we will use for rolling out the pastry and for blind baking. And of course we'll need a tart case, ideally with a removable bottom. The case that I'm using is 20 centimeters or 8 inches across, but you can get away with using a slightly larger one. We'll need something to weigh the pastry down for blind baking. You can use dedicated baking beans or rice. I'm going to use bulgur wheat. Okay, let's start by making the pastry. Grab a large bowl, combine the flour, the icing sugar, the ground nuts and the salt. Give it all a good mix. Make sure everything is well combined and make sure there are no lumps in the icing sugar. You could also sift it beforehand. Once you are happy with the mix, add the butter to it. It doesn't really matter if you're using cold butter pieces or room temperature butter. It's still the same process at the end. You want to crumble the ingredients together. Keep breaking the butter up and coating it in the dry mix until the mix develops a sandy texture. Now we can add the final ingredient, the egg yolk. Give everything a very good mix now. I first like to break the egg yolk up and mix it into the ingredients, and I like to finish the pastry by kneading it a little bit and making sure that it's all nice and cohesive. Once you can shape it into a nice smooth ball, it's ready. To make it easier to work with, we'll chill it before we use it. Place the ball of pastry on a piece of cling film and flatten it out. Then wrap it up so it doesn't dry out and pop it in the fridge to cool down for around 45 minutes. During this time you can start preheating the oven to 160 degrees Celsius, 320 Fahrenheit, fan on. And that'll be 180 Celsius or 355 Fahrenheit, fan off. While the pastry is chilling and the oven is preheating, we can prepare our tart tin. Brush the whole surface with some softened butter. Then sprinkle the tart case with a handful of flour. Now pick it up, shake it around, turn it and knock it. Ensure that the whole surface is covered in flour. Once the whole surface is completely covered, you want to knock out the excess flour. This buttery, floury coating will guarantee that the pastry doesn't stick to the case. You can use the same method for cake tins also. It works very well. Okay, once the timer is up, grab the pastry out the freezer, place it on a piece of non-stick baking paper, then dust it with flour and roll it out. Remember, it's pastry, not dough, so it will be slightly crumbly. As you roll it out, the edges will start cracking. What I like to do to fix it is to first roll the pastry out a bit and then use my fingers to push the edge in to even it out again, and then finish rolling it to the desired size. Stop once in a while and measure it against your tart case. And this looks just about right. Now since this pastry is quite crumbly, we can't really pick it up. So here's my method for moving it to the tart case. First, place the bottom of the case in the middle of the pastry, with the floured side facing the pastry. Now take the ring and align it over the base. Now slide your hand underneath the paper, pick the whole thing up and then flip it in one smooth move. This pastry is quite crumbly, so some of the edges might break, but that's normal, don't worry about it. Remove the baking paper, set that aside, we'll use it in a minute. Now arrange the pastry so that it fits the case perfectly. Make sure that it goes down into the corner where the edge meets the bottom, and be sure to press the sides into the grooves and leave a little overhang over the edge, because we don't want the pastry to fall down into the case as it bakes. Place the tart case with the pastry on a baking sheet. Now take the same piece of baking paper that you used for rolling out the pastry with and squish it together. Wrinkle it all up. Make it as wrinkly and soft as possible. This will make it conform to the pastry case, and it will prevent it from having any sharp edges. Gently mold it so that it fits the pastry. And now pour in the baking beans or bulgur wheat or rice or whatever you're using. Spread it out, push it in, ensure that it's nice and even all over the place. Okay, let's get this thing in the oven. The initial bake will take 20 minutes. After the first 20 minutes of baking, remove the pastry from the oven and gently remove the paper with the grains. Be nice and slow and careful. At this point the pastry is still quite fragile. Release the edges first and only then lift it out. Reserve the grains for later. You can reuse them endlessly. If there's a bit of a damage to the pastry, you can try and fix it at this point. We need to bake this for 10 more minutes, but before it goes back into the oven, we'll trim the edge off. In my opinion, trimming the edge now is much safer and easier than doing it later. Be careful, don't rush it, and cut outwards. Once the edge has been trimmed, place the pastry back into the oven for another 10 minutes of baking. The reason for covering the pastry and weighing it down for the initial bake is to ensure that it doesn't puff up and get distorted. Okay, while the pastry is baking, we can move on to making the filling. In a large bowl, combine the icing sugar, the vanilla, and the butter. Grab a whisk and then mix until it's all nice and smooth. And here again you could sift the icing sugar beforehand. It's not completely necessary as you can see, but it could make your life easier. Once the mix is nice and smooth and there are no lumps in the icing sugar, add the eggs and whisk them in. After whisking in the eggs, we can add the final ingredient, the ground nuts. Now whisk it one last time to ensure that there are no lumps. Now we can transfer the mix to a piping bag, that is if you are using one. I know it's not very economical to use plastic like this, but these heavy duty piping bags can be washed and reused. Okay, once the pastry is fully baked, it is ready to be filled straight away. There is no need to cool it down. You could of course prepare the pastry ahead of time. You could keep it in the fridge, you could even freeze it. I'm just showing you the quick version here. Okay, let's fill this thing up and top it with figs. I had about a quarter of my mix left over. That's because I based my recipe off of 2 eggs. But I don't want you to waste ingredients, so I've written the recipe below with the correct amounts. But because of that, you will need to use 80 grams of egg, which is a bit less than 2 whole eggs. So to really not waste anything, you can use the leftover egg for the pastry instead of the egg yolk. Okay, let's get this thing in the oven. It'll take around 45 minutes to fully bake. Once it's beautifully golden brown all over, it is ready. Get it out of the oven and then leave it to cool down at room temperature for around 1 hour. Once it's cool enough to handle, remove the ring from the tart case and then using something like a dough scraper, release the tart case bottom from the pastry and then move the whole thing to the fridge to cool down completely. It will be much easier to slice when it's completely cold. Right before serving, warm up a little bit of honey and brush it all over the tart. This will not only make it look beautiful and shiny, but also add a great flavor. Figs and honey, they just go so well together. And there you go, that's how you make a beautiful fig and hazelnut tart. Another super simple recipe that will make you look like a pro. And if you have a bit of a sweet tooth, head over to the Pastry, Cakes and Sweet Bakes playlist. It is full of delicious recipes. And don't forget to let me know how they turn out. So what do you think of this recipe? And what's your favorite type of tart? Let me know down in the comments. You want to see more videos like this one? Click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.